But I'd really love to move to Vancouver, like full time.
So this is Vancouver, BC. It is Canada's third biggest city with almost 2.5 million people, and it's nestled right in between the mountains and the valleys on the edge of the Pacific Ocean. Now, I've lived here full time for almost a year and spent countless months living here over the past couple of summers as a visitor. I've seen the good, I've seen the bad. This video is going to cover everything from the weather and climate to the history of Vancouver, why I personally moved here, the accessibility and affordability, things to do for fun, the food scene, as well as the homeless and opioid crisis, and more. There are timestamps below for all this stuff, so you can skip ahead to whatever point you like. This video is sponsored by Sheath Underwear. Let's begin. Now, I'm not from Vancouver. I was born and raised actually in the heart of the prairies in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Now, I've called Winnipeg home for over 20 plus years of my 27 years of life. But prior to moving to Vancouver, or even coming here as a visitor, one of the biggest myths that I heard was that it rains 24/7 and it never stops and people are miserable here. And I'm going to tell you why that people tell you this. I believe that Vancouver is the most beautiful major city in North America. It's the best quality of life that you can get in a big city in Canada. It solves a lot of the problems I think people outside of BC look for in life. Now, the one downside is that in the winter, it rains probably 25 out of 30 days a month in November, December, January, and February. So if the mainstream media and people living here tell you that it rains 12 months out of the year and how awful it is, you'll never want to move here. But the reality is that Vancouver from November until February isn't the greatest. It's wet and cold, but March through October is why you live here. Sunshine, beautiful weather ranging from 15 to 20 degrees most days, and scenery that gets better and better as the season goes on and cannot be beat anywhere else in North America. Now, the weather obviously isn't perfect. There are cloudy, rainy days that do happen in summer, but very few and far between. And winters also do have snow, believe it or not. Now, usually if it does snow, it only lasts a day or two and then it's all gone. But the funny part here is that the city will completely and absolutely shut down when it happens because nobody has winter tires, nobody's prepared for real winter Canadian conditions, and nobody really expects it. But I do have to say, most people in Vancouver will hate me for saying this, but I think that there's something so beautiful about the city of Vancouver and the surrounding areas covered in bright white snow, from the mountains to downtown, crystal clear blue water running along Falls Creek, from the harbor into the Pacific Ocean on a beautiful jet blue sky day. There's just something so aesthetically pleasing, and I love it. Maybe it's because I don't own a vehicle and I don't drive here, which we'll get into more later, but Vancouver in snow is, I think, the prettiest the city has ever been. So this right here is the city of Vancouver, specifically downtown Vancouver. And if I was to boil down, I guess, a few reasons why you'd want to move here and why I specifically moved here is it's April, and hopefully, as you can see around me, it is beautifully green and everything is just coming into form. It's incredible. The weather is great. There really is no winter, although there hasn't been much snow in the past 2 years, but this winter 3 times I witnessed snow in Vancouver, which was different. I mean, as you can see on the screen, it looks out of place. Blue skies and snow in Vancouver, but the weather is great. Most people think of this as Vancouver, but the truth is Vancouver is made up of multiple cities within it. Downtown Vancouver right here, which is I think what most people think of when they think of Vancouver, and that extends all the way through here, and within that you have the infamous downtown east side, obviously on the east side of downtown Vancouver, also known as Gastown, as well as Cole Harbor on the west side that runs into Stanley Park, and English Bay on the other side facing the ocean. You also have the Granville areas, Kitsilano Beach, Yaletown, Olympic Village that kind of round out the whole downtown area back into the suburbs of Vancouver, and where I specifically live here in River District. Now, across downtown harbor is North Vancouver, and to the west of it is, you guessed it, West Vancouver, really original here. And to the east of Vancouver itself is Burnaby, Coquitlam, Port Moody, and the crime-riddled Surrey. More on that later. And finally, to the south of Vancouver is Richmond and Delta, as well as Steveston. Now, the population of Vancouver itself is only about 600,000 people, and fun fact, now the Vancouver skyline is absolutely jaw-droppingly beautiful. It really is the postcard picture visual with Cypress, Grouse, and Seymour Mountains in the background, beautiful blue water of the Pacific Ocean flowing into English Bay, the Burrard Inlet, and into Falls Creek. But I think that one thing that stands out here is that there really isn't that many tall buildings. Just a lot of glass buildings that look the exact same, and they never exceed a certain height with a few exceptions. Especially when you compare it to downtown Toronto, or New York, or Calgary, or even Winnipeg for that matter. Vancouver skyline really isn't that tall. So obviously, both you and I, as well as the city of Vancouver, know they are sitting on an absolute hidden gem with the mountains and the surrounding visuals. So they have restrictions in place that no buildings can exceed a certain height within the city, or a height that they would deem that would cover up the mountain views from around and outside the city, which I really appreciate because, again, it's truly beautiful, and I think that you can see the mountains from almost anywhere in the Vancouver areas, whether it's on the bus, on the SkyTrain, at the beach, walking the downtown streets, or even arriving on a plane in the YVR Airport, or by train on the Via Rails the Canadian at Pacific Central Station. You can't miss the mountains. They are awesome, and I think it's one of the biggest reasons that really attracted me to living in Vancouver. So I've always been kind of a load of a history nut, like architecture, landscapes, history have always fascinated me, and Vancouver's no different, but specifically here at the waterfront station where this thing's well over 100 years old, this used to be absolutely nothing back in the day. Like this, there was nobody here. It was flat and not much else. Vancouver's an awesome place. A little expensive, obviously, but it's one of the reasons why in these videos you see so many awesome skyline shots, so many mountain shots. I mean, it's just a really awesome place. Now, what about the reason why I moved to Vancouver? So I have very unique circumstances. I play professional hockey for a living, and my personal goalie coach here, Pascal Villana, was based in Vancouver. And I believe in him so much that I decided that I need to spend time with him on the ice, especially before the start of the season. So I would spend a week with him here in December of 2020, a couple weeks in March of 2021, a month in August of 2021, and over a month plus in August and September of 2022. So when I needed to have my hip surgery done in January of 2023, I decided that rehabbing my life in Vancouver would be the best thing for me between having my goalie coach, my physio, personal trainer, and a happy quality of life that I would need in a time coming up where I probably wouldn't really have a lot to look forward to and get excited about, from the accessibility to the incredible food scene to the amazing weather and climate and lifestyle, all of which let's get into. I really kind of want to go to Vancouver and move here on a full-time basis, maybe next off-season once the season in Sweden's done, and hopefully the world goes back to normal. Now, one of the first things that I discovered about Vancouver from visiting that absolutely shocked me was how accessible the city is. Now, I've lived in places like Winnipeg and Detroit where if you don't have a vehicle, for lack of a better term, you're kind of and you can't get around anywhere. But I've also played professionally 2 years in Sweden, just outside of Stockholm and Gothenburg, where you're probably at a disadvantage if you own a vehicle. And Vancouver has incredible accessibility. The transportation is incredible. They have buses that run very frequently and will get you wherever you need to go in a reasonable amount of time. They also have the SkyTrain, which conceptually is just a monorail in some areas that transitions into a subway train, but it's incredible. Each train can transport over 10,000 people per hour. It runs on 3 different routes, one being the Canada Line, which will take you from the south of Richmond all the way into downtown Vancouver at the waterfront in about 30 minutes. The Expo Line that runs from waterfront in downtown Vancouver into Burnaby and Surrey, and that takes about 45 minutes, as well as the Millennium Line that runs from East Vancouver to Coquitlam and Port Moody in about 30 plus minutes. They also have a building extension on the SkyTrain that should be complete by 2025 that connects the Millennium Line in East Vancouver about halfway to UBC, which is a major university in Vancouver, and these trains run about every 3 to 5 minutes during the day and about probably every 10 minutes during the late night morning hours. They also have the Sea Bus, which is incredible. It's a ferry that runs you from the Vancouver waterfront across the harbor to North Vancouver in less than 15 minutes compared to the 20 to 45 minute drive that you'd have to take if you're going over the Lionsgate Bridge or the Ironworkers Bridge. Again, this is the exact same route. This is also very affordable. They have a 3-zone system fare, which costs you about $105, $140, or $190 respectively for an all-you-can-eat pass throughout the month, so 30 plus days, and you can ride it as much as you want. Now, in regard to getting in and out of the city to, let's say, Calgary or Winnipeg or Toronto or even internationally, you have YVR Airport, which the SkyTrain will actually take you directly to from Vancouver Waterfront Station to the airport in about 35 minutes. Now, obviously, YVR is an international airport, so at that point, it'll take you anywhere you need to go. And fun fact, there are actually 4 Starbucks in the airport, and the Air Canada Maple Leaf Lounge, which I have been to before, is somewhat disappointing, but that was just my experience. Now, Vancouver also has VRL, which is a national government-subsidized passenger train service that runs out of Pacific Central Station here just outside of downtown Vancouver on the east side. Now, the train only departs twice a week on Mondays and Fridays, running through Kamloops, Jasper National Park in the Canadian Rockies, Saskatoon, where I was born in Winnipeg, before arriving into downtown Toronto 5 days later. Now, it is fairly expensive, but it is the most comfortable and relaxing way to travel, so if you can find the money to do it, I absolutely recommend it. The train service used to be more affordable and it ran daily and used to go through Revelstoke, Lake Louise, Banff, and Calgary, but the government cut that service in January of 1990, sadly, which I do understand to this day, but it is what it is. You can also walk around Vancouver if you want. Now, this is a very large city, but I personally love walking anywhere I can, anytime I get, assuming the time permits, and I think that Vancouverites would agree, because the city itself is surrounded by something called the Seawall, which I've outlined here on the screen. And this is a paved walking path that runs around the entire waterline of downtown Vancouver, from English Bay, around Stanley Park, through Cole Harbor, stopping at the Old Canadian Pacific Waterfront Station, and running again from BC Place, around Falls Creek, past Olympic Village in Mount Pleasant and around Granville Island, and concluding at Kitsilano Beach. You can also bike or rollerblade on any of these paths as well. Now, the actual inner portion of downtown Vancouver is very walkable itself. Keep in mind that it is uphill, so you're going to get some really good exercise if you're walking everywhere like I do. But overall, I think Vancouver is extremely accessible by foot, by transit, sea bus, train, within the city, out of the city. I think it is the most accessible city in Canada. Now, what about fun activities and what I do for fun in Vancouver? Well, one thing that I've fallen in love with since moving here are the beaches. Now, I don't think I've ever been to a quote-unquote nice beach in Winnipeg, but in Vancouver, there's Kitsilano, Jericho, and English Bay Beach. Now, these are all awesome beaches that have me wanting to come back every single Sunday It's beautiful weather, friendly people, and good vibes. And I think Vancouver is also probably the healthiest city out there. So there's lots of gyms, lots of hockey rinks, fitness centers, yoga classes, mixed martial arts studio. You'll find all of it here. Vancouver is also a super outdoorsy city, as you can tell from the incredible mountain backdrop. So if you're looking to do hikes, nature walks, all that kind of stuff, there is no shortage of that here. Let's talk about the affordability and the expenses of Vancouver. Vancouver is in the province of BC, and if you didn't know, the initials for BC stand for Bring Cash, because Vancouver is the most expensive city to live in Canada, and the third most expensive city to live in the world, which is mind-boggling. Vancouver has the most expensive housing market, most expensive gas, food, everything in Canada. And if you're driving in Vancouver, you're probably paying a minimum of $200 to $300 a month in insurance. Gas being 20 cents a liter more expensive than anywhere else in the country. I'd estimate you're spending $200 a month, maybe more on gas, obviously depending on what you drive and how much you drive. Now, it does feel like everybody in Vancouver drives a Tesla, which is a great way to not spend $200 a month on gas and get closer to $25 a month on charging, but you also need to be able to afford a $70,000 car where also the electricity is produced from gas. So all this considered, I don't think Vancouver is the most driving-friendly city. There is a good amount of traffic too, and the couple times that I have driven here. I think that food also is more expensive than anywhere else in the world, from eggs to cheese, chicken thighs to pastries, everything in between. Even coffee at Starbucks feels more expensive. I'm not sure if that's an actual fact, but it definitely feels like it. And by the way, chicken thighs are an absolute hidden gem in this crazy expensive Vancouver economy. Now, the housing and the rental markets here are actually very scary. The apartment that I live in right now is a one-bedroom, 500 plus square foot, for $2,500 a month, plus $75 for Wi-Fi and $75 for hydro. So $2,650 all in. And this was the cheapest setup that I could find anywhere, from North Vancouver to downtown Vancouver, Richmond, Burnaby, all of it. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I live in the River District area, which is a newer residential area in Vancouver, which didn't really exist 3 years ago. But anything cheap living-wise in the metro areas is gone quickly, within minutes. Because realistically speaking, I like to think that the average one bedroom here runs for about $2,500 to $3,000 a month, which is absolutely absurd. Again, anything cheaper, it's gone instantly. So that's probably the prices you're going to be paying. And I think the biggest contributor to this fact is that there are just so many people living here and not enough homes. And there are so many barriers to entry, so many delays to get anything built, that it just never happens. And to be honest with you, I'm not going to be diving into the buying and owning housing market, because essentially, if you're not in the 1% elites, good luck owning anything outside of even a tool shed, because Vancouver, it's not happening. You could probably purchase the entire province of Saskatchewan for a mid-level home in Vancouver. And on average, they say that if you're making $300,000 a year plus, it's going to be a while before you can own a home, which again is scary. But if there is one thing that is affordable, and I think that everybody in Vancouver needs, it's a pair of Sheath underwear. As a man, I'm constantly dealing with my hog and my hammer sticking to the side of my leg. But Sheath underwear fixes all that with their dual pouch technology to keep everything separated and breathing. They're made from their incredibly comfortable cooling bamboo mesh technology that'll keep you regulated in these rainy, wet Vancouver winters and cool in the hot summers. And you can pick up a set of Sheath underwear today for 20% off at the first link in the description when you use my code TRAVSUCKS for 20% off. And whether you're getting the 8-inch version, the 4-inch version, sports performance, or airflow model, I guarantee you will love Sheath underwear. And you don't even have to live in Vancouver for this. Anybody will love Sheath underwear. And I want to say thanks to Sheath for sponsoring this video. Now, although the housing market is, to be quite honest, awful, I think that's not the worst part of Vancouver. Now, Vancouver is home to, I would say, North America's most well-known homeless and opioid crisis. If you walk anywhere downtown, you will find somebody strung out on a bus bench, tripping on the sidewalk, or somebody that probably resembles more of a zombie than human walking around the area. I'm a 6'5", 230-pound man, and I wouldn't even think about walking downtown into the downtown east side or into any of these areas at night in the dark. I think you're just asking for trouble. Violent crime is on the rise, and people are somewhat consistently getting stabbed and murdered in broad daylight, like on the streets here the past couple months, which I do find kind of scary and shocking, to be honest. And I think this is significantly worse if you see it in person with your own two eyes than what you've probably seen on TV. But I do think that the one outlier here is that none of this seems to be in North Vancouver or West Vancouver. Granted, those are the most expensive places to live in the area, and they truly are for the elites. But almost a full year of living in Vancouver, I'm still yet to see any of this in those areas, and it's just something worth noting. Now, the question that I ask myself on a daily basis prior to moving here full time, and something I still think about today, is Vancouver an incredible place to live, or an incredible place to visit regularly, or a place to avoid? Now, I want to reiterate that I've been very fortunate enough to play hockey all the way around the world. I've lived in a lot of cool places, and I also grew up in Winnipeg, which, to be honest, is the murder capital of Canada. And it's probably one of, if not the cheapest cities to live in, big cities, in Canada. But anytime I go back home to see my family in Winnipeg, anytime I go away to travel, I always think about Vancouver. I'm always looking forward to coming back. And when I do live here and I am here in person, I'm always in constant gratitude and appreciation for being here. Now, obviously, there's a lot of work to be done in Vancouver and Canada as a whole to fix this outrageous homeless problem, the opioid crisis, and this out-of-control surge in violent crime and lack of affordability across the board. But if you have the ability to avoid and minimize these issues by living in a Kitsilano or not making poor choices, I think the quality of life you get here, the incredible warm but not too hot weather, the accessibility of the food scene, and the happiness and overall quality of life here compared to any other big city in Canada is unmatched. And it's why I live here, it's why I love being here, and it's why Vancouver, along with small towns like Revelstoke or Banff, will be places that I look to settle down full-time in when I retire from professional hockey. I'm curious, if you live in Vancouver, what do you think about this video, everything I said? Are you looking to move to Vancouver, or are you some weirdo living in Toronto? Whatever it is, leave a comment in the comment section below. If you got a question, leave it there, and I'd love to answer it, and I'll try to get back to you as quickly as I can. Hit the subscribe button if you want to see more videos like this, travel vlogs when I travel, or follow my journey through professional hockey. I want to say thanks to Sheath Underwear for sponsoring this video. Make sure you use that code TRAVSUCKS for 20% off if you want to pick up an awesome pair of Sheath Underwear today. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video.